Having sustained the engineering department for 12 years, my supervisor terminated me. We'll get 3 new grads at your salary. What happens when the very backbone of a company, the quiet genius holding everything together, is unceremoniously discarded? What if, months later, that same company came begging, their entire empire on the brink of collapse, because you were gone? The fluorescent hum of the conference room felt colder than usual that Tuesday. Robert, my supervisor, leaned back, a half-smile playing on his lips, his pen clicking a rhythmic, dismissive beat. "We could hire 3 junior engineers for your salary," he stated, as if discussing bulk screws, not the end of a career. I just nodded. There was no argument to be made, no defense. The silence that followed was heavy solid. Everyone in that room understood. This wasn't cost-cutting. This was disposal. My name is Julian, and for 12 years, I was the guy they called when something expensive broke, when the alarms went off, when the line stopped, and everyone started looking for an adult. I'd built that engineering department from a dusty storage closet and a single drafting table. First one in at 6 a.m., last to kill the lights around 9 p.m. I never asked for raises. I foolishly believed results spoke for themselves. In 2018, when the main pump failed, I stayed 36 hours straight, rigged a hydraulic bypass no one else dared touch, and saved them $400,000 in downtime. Last year, the impossible Westport project, I drove out, ran a meeting at 2 a.m. just for 10 minutes with their VP, found the fix, stabilized the plan. Westport alone brought in almost $900,000. None of it, apparently, mattered in the face of Robert's clicking pen. I packed my desk into a single box. A faded photo of Isabella, my dented thermos, a cheap award ruler, and my notebooks. Pages filled with calculations, intricate diagrams, my unique problem-solving methods, the true backbone of their operation. Robert stood there, already done with me. "Nothing personal, Julian, just business." I understood, all right. Just not in the way he thought. I walked past the people I'd trained, the faces I'd seen every day for years. Not a word. The office hummed with feigned normalcy, keyboards clacking, a printer cycling, as if I wasn't even there. Marcus looked up, started to speak, but Robert's glance froze him, sending him diving back into his monitor. Chloe pretended to be on a call. David stared at his keyboard like it might offer protection. Out in my car, that single box on the passenger seat, I felt an emptiness I hadn't known in decades. My calendar, usually packed, was suddenly blank. For the first time in years, it meant nothing. I knew then, there was only one engineer in that entire plant who knew where the hidden cable runs between Workshop 2 and 5 were installed back in '98. Never documented. I'd traced them by hand during an audit no one else wanted. I never wrote them down because the place ran on tribal knowledge on my memory. One engineer who could tell a client no without losing them. Who knew which suppliers delivered and which needed constant pressure. Who knew the zone 4 temperature sensors always read high. That engineer? He just left the parking lot. I didn't make a scene. I just left at the right time and let physics work. I drove home at 2:15 p.m., the roads eerily empty. Isabella's car wasn't in the driveway. She taught art at the community center. She wouldn't be back until 4. I set the box on the kitchen table, made coffee, and waited. She walked in at 4:20, saw me, saw the box. "So, you just left?" she asked, her voice quiet. I nodded. "Didn't even tell them where to shove it?" "No." She looked at me, a familiar, quiet disappointment I'd been collecting for years reflected in her eyes. "What happens next?" she asked. "Rest a bit," I replied, "then figure it out." She nodded, closed the bedroom door softly. I remembered the weekend she'd asked for 3 years ago. 2 days at the coast. I'd told her I couldn't. Project deadline. She didn't argue. She just stopped asking. I opened my notebook. The pages were worn where my thumb always sat. My work, my unique methods, the stuff nobody else bothered to learn. It was all there. And then, the part I'd been ignoring, Ethan. 24. Fresh degree. 0 experience. Hired 3 months ago, outside the usual process. Robert's personal pick, introduced with that proud, annoying tone. Ethan's going to bring fresh perspective. Fresh perspective meant connections. Ethan got development time. Ethan got praise for basic tasks. Great initiative on that tolerance review, Ethan. The review I wrote. He'd copied it word for word, down to my weird formatting. When I'd raised risks, I was accused of tone issues. When I said a timeline was physically impossible, I was told to be collaborative. My real job became anchoring Ethan, making sure he didn't fail, and making sure it looked like he succeeded. Robert called me into his office once. Walk Ethan through the Meridian retrofit. Let him present. I stared at him. You want me to do all the work and let him take the credit? Julian, he'd smiled, I want you to develop future leadership. So I did. 8 hours, walking him through specs, tolerances, suppliers. At the all-hands meeting, Robert beamed. Ethan found cost-saving opportunities worth about $120,000 over the next year. Exactly the innovative thinking we need. Ethan looked profoundly uncomfortable. He didn't correct Robert. I didn't either. The irony? I'd emailed those exact savings 3 months earlier. Robert ignored it. Ethan said it once, and it was genius. Afterward, Ethan tried to speak. I cut him off. It's fine. It wasn't. We both knew it. 2 weeks later, Ethan specified the wrong material grade on another project. Under thermal load, it would have failed catastrophically. I caught it in review and fixed it quietly. Robert never knew. That should have been my warning. The next morning, an email from David, my former colleague. 7:45 a.m. Heard what happened. Everyone's in shock. Nobody saw this coming. Marcus says Robert moved fast so you wouldn't have time to do anything. Let me know if you need anything. I let it sit. I went to the library instead, the same one where I'd first tackled that production efficiency problem back in 2013, the solution that became the foundation for everything I built at Northline. The book was still there, 3rd floor, Mechanical Engineering, Formulas for Efficiency in Mechanical Engineering, published 1987. I picked it up. Sat at the same table by the window. Started thinking. Not about work, but about what I actually wanted. That evening, Robert called. 5:17 p.m. Tuesday. I stared at the screen. Robert ringing. I let it ring out. Didn't call back the next day or the day after. 3 days later, an email arrived. Friday, 4:32 p.m. Julian, we're having difficulties with the Keystone project. Need your advice. We'll pay. We'd like you to come in briefly. I understand how it looks, but this isn't a request. It's an offer. Keystone. A huge contract, complex automation for a distribution center. I knew the approval chain, the specification pitfalls, which suppliers would ghost without constant pressure. Without me, they were sinking. They knew it. I could have gone in. Could have taken the money, maybe $175 an hour, cleared $2,000 in a week. Instead, I closed my laptop. Went to wash dishes. Isabella walked into the kitchen, saw me scrubbing the same plate 3 times. She asked if I got that email. I nodded. Asked if I was going to respond. I said no. She nodded, no commentary. That silence was louder than any words. The next day, I called David. Saturday morning. He answered on the first ring. Julian. A beat. Everyone's in shock. Nobody saw it coming. They did, I countered. They just didn't think it'd be me. David exhaled. It's a disaster here. What happened? Robert gave Keystone to Ethan, he said. I sat up straight. Ethan? Yeah. And he's answering technical questions with buzzword synergy, optimization. David's voice went thin. Leo stopped calling. He's sending formal complaints now. Escalations. Everything in writing. Good. David went quiet. Then there's more. Say it. Robert offered Marcus your role if he stayed quiet in the layoff meeting. I stared at the table. Marcus took it. Yeah. David swallowed. He told me last night. Acting guilty. He's not guilty, I corrected him. He's scared. David hesitated. Julian. I almost warned you. That morning, Robert was in the hallway. I froze. I didn't answer right away. It wouldn't have changed anything, I said. I'm sorry. I know. David tried again, softer. So, what are you going to do? I don't know yet. You going back? No. You going to help them with Keystone? I looked at the phone like it was testing me. No. Okay, David said, quiet. Okay. I hung up and sat there with the silence. Marcus's silence was purchased. David's was fear. Standard. Actually, there's more to the Marcus thing that makes it worse. HR only let me pack the basics that first day. Said I could come back for the rest. When I returned the next week for the personal files still in my desk drawers, I walked past my old spot, corner office, window view, the spot I'd had for 6 years. Marcus was sitting there, a new nameplate already up. He saw me coming and literally turned away, pretending to be on a call. But I saw it. His old desk was in the bullpen. Now he had mine. The benefits of staying quiet. Later that day, I found a business card. Conference in Chicago 2 years back. Guy from a consulting firm, Vantage Works Consulting. I put it on the table. Opened my laptop. Started listing clients and their quirks, specs, the off-book tolerances, undocumented tweaks. My own methods, failure mode notes saved after the CAD crash in 2021. Northline had a few PDFs, but the real work was in my head and on paper. The fixes nobody wrote down. The bypasses. The hacks. The one mechanical change that saved 90,000. 3 inventions that never got filed. I opened a blank document and typed, "What actually keeps the company running?" Then I texted David, "Friday, I'll bring the notebook." We met Friday evening at Sam's, an old place near the office. Good coffee, burgers that tasted like actual meat. David looked older, 52, worked there 16 years. He stood when I walked in, shook my hand firm. We sat in comfortable silence. The waitress brought coffee without asking, she remembered. I pulled out my notebook, set it between the salt shaker and ketchup. David leaned closer, started reading. His face changed as he flipped through pages, my problem-solving approaches, client contacts who dealt with me personally, my own engineering methods that were never formally documented, lessons learned from failures, approaches that truly worked. He asked if it was still valid. I told him some was outdated. Some of what they were using now was never meant to be final. If they kept pretending it would bite them. Not my problem anymore, I said. He exhaled slowly. Asked what I wanted. I want them coming to me, I said, taking a long sip of coffee. Not out of politeness, but because they need me. He said he could help. Had connections at Vantage Works. They'd tried to recruit him 2 years ago. They cared about results. The next day, I sent an email using that business card, short, direct, open to talking. Experience in mechanical engineering, system design, quality control. Can show real examples of solved problems others avoided. Available for contract work or consultation. Julian. Isabella saw me print it. She was making lunch, grilled cheese. Asked if I was really getting involved in this again. I told her I was getting involved in not being silent. She nodded. Set the sandwich in front of me. For the first time in weeks, her look wasn't indifferent. It was understanding. Monday morning, 9:15 a.m. A Keystone client email hit my personal inbox, the same one I'd given Leo 2 years ago during late-night crisis calls when their previous contractor had ghosted mid-project. Julian, you're not with Northline anymore, but maybe you can find 15 minutes to talk. We're ready to pay for your time. This is urgent. I met their rep in a neutral conference room downtown. They didn't want to go back to Northline's office. That said everything. Leo sat down, composed, like the meeting had already started. Julian. Leo. No small talk. He slid a tablet across the table. We didn't even know you'd left. Everything fell apart in 1 week. I looked at the screen. It was my drawing. Big label at the top, draft version 2.3. Preliminary. Not for final use. This, Leo said, his voice tight, is what Northline sent us as final specs. 40% of the components say pending supplier confirmation. Material grades are TBD. We asked your replacement what it meant, and he froze. I zoomed in. My margin notes, my handwriting. This is a draft, I said. I sent it for approach review. Final specs come after your team signs off. Leo's face tightened further. Robert told us it was final. Robert didn't know what he was looking at. The silence was heavy, almost clinical. Leo leaned back. So, what do you want? I'm not with Northline, I said. If I help you, it's direct. No work through them. Separate contract, transparent payment. I choose the scope. Leo didn't flinch. Rate, $175 an hour for diagnosis and consultation. Fixed project rates negotiable. He stared at me for a beat, then nodded once. Send terms. I will. We stood, shook hands. Not like businessmen, but like people who were done being played. The next day, I wrote to David, if you're still in touch with Vantage Works, put me in contact. Ready to talk. 2 days later, I sat across from Samantha, technical director at Vantage Works. Small office, clean, no corporate art trying to convince you the place had a soul. She'd read my resume. David had filled in the parts paper couldn't carry. We need people who can keep systems running when they fall apart, she said. I'm not a magician, I told her. I've just watched enough things break. Samantha smiled. That was the only answer she cared about. Exactly. Project basis. A couple months to start, no strings. What's first? I asked. Logistics client. Assembly line keeps jamming. 3 consulting firms couldn't fix it. Timeline, yesterday. I smiled. When do I start? As I walked out, I didn't feel hollow. No rush, no high. Just sober calm. Back in business. On my terms. When I got home, Isabella poured tea without a word. Then she said, this is different. This time, you're not doing it for them. You're doing it for yourself. I nodded. And for the first time in a long time, she looked at me like I wasn't a problem she was waiting to outlast. She looked at me like I'd finally woken up. But something else happened that week, something I'd set in motion without even realizing. I'd sent those preliminary drawings to Leo at Keystone months ago, clearly labeled. Draft version 2.3. Preliminary, not for final use. Standard practice. But Robert didn't know that. When Leo asked Northline for the updated system specs, Robert found my old PDF drafts in the shared folder, assumed they were final, and sent them directly to Keystone. No review. No engineering check. Leo's team started asking questions. Ethan had no idea what any of it meant. A week after my first Keystone call, I'd done 3 video sessions and 1 on-site. The core problem revealed itself in the first hour. The control system was fighting the sensor array because someone had installed incompatible firmware versions. Classic. The fix wasn't expensive, it just needed someone who knew what to look for. Leo was stunned. On our last call, he said, you saved us 5 weeks and about $180,000 in equipment replacement. What was your old company doing? I just shrugged. Selling young and cheap. They asked if they could share my name. Yes, I told them, but don't tie it to Northline. I'm independent. At the same time, Vantage Works dropped my first assignment, a logistics distribution center moving over 50,000 units a day when it worked. When it didn't, it cost $10,000 an hour. Frankenstein equipment from 3 manufacturers, 15 years of patch jobs, and a team of fresh grads who'd never diagnosed a live system with missing documentation. I didn't chase authority. I watched. Day 1, map the process. 8 hours of observation and notes while everyone begged for a quick fix. Day 2, trace the failure points. 12 small issues compounding under load. Critical heat expansion in Zone 7 throwing off sensor alignment. Misaligned rollers in Section 12 creating drag. A timing delay in the control sequence that only showed up at peak throughput. Day 3, apply fixes and explain why they worked. Physics, mechanics, control logic. I let them ask questions, treated them like engineers. By day 4, they stopped doubting and started thinking. By day 5, they were taking their own notes. By day 7, they invited me to lunch. Caleb, the director, asked, why didn't the previous consultants find this? Because they were hunting one big failure, I explained. This was 12 small ones. You only see it if you watch the whole system long enough. Day 9, Caleb emailed, line is running at 98% uptime. We want a more stable arrangement. Then the old network woke up. Another client from 4 years back asked if I was available. Said I was one of the only people they trusted. David called next tense. Robert was building a dossier, court threats, poaching accusations, reputation hits. I told David the truth. I hadn't recruited anyone. I just hadn't stopped adults from making their own choices. Be careful, David warned. I'm calm, I replied. Isabella sat beside me after I hung up. He going to attack? She asked. He'll try, I smiled. Then don't look back. That week, I told her about the VantageWorks deal, the flood of emails, 5 in 2 days. She listened, then said, so now you're the one choosing. For once, she was right. The next week filled fast, 2 client calls and 1 lawyer. Northline's attorney came in, polished and cold. Stop consulting on anything tied to your old work. I told him my contract was done. No drawings, no proprietary files, just experience. This could be intellectual property. Let them prove it, I countered. Experience is an IP. 2 days later, VantageWorks offered a 6-month contract. I rewrote the terms: freedom to pick tasks, permission for private work, the right to refuse projects, no non-compete. They agreed. Isabella went quiet when I told her, then finally said, "You're your own boss now, Julian. Even if it all blows up tomorrow, you're not one of them anymore." That night, a new email hit my inbox. Briggs & Calder. We want you to build an engineering department from scratch. We hear you build teams that function. They didn't mention Northline. They didn't have to. 3 months out, and they weren't asking me to come back. They were asking me to rebuild on my terms. I met with Arthur from Briggs & Calder in a hotel conference room. Guy in his 40s, polite but serious. Chief Operating Officer. He said they knew who I was, not from paperwork, but from results. They needed a department that worked, not one for visibility. Effectiveness. He asked if I understood this meant a complete break with Northline. He said they were ready. Had legal support. The main thing was if I was interested. I was, but didn't want to rush. I told him I wasn't building a department for the sake of one. I was bringing together people who knew how to do things, but they had to trust me as much as I trusted them. He said they'd give complete autonomy. Main thing was results. He handed me a tablet. Terms. I flipped through. For the first time, someone valued the old craft itself. No nonsense, just essentials. I took a day to think. I told Isabella everything when I got home. Said they wanted me to start from scratch my way. She asked if I was afraid. I told her I was just wondering if it was too late. 58 years old, starting over. She put coffee in front of me, sat opposite. You're not 58, she said softly. You're someone who lived by other people's rules for decades. Now, your first real year is beginning. The next morning, I signed the preliminary agreement. 2 days later, an email from Maya, former systems analyst from my team. Heard you're building something new. If you need someone who can do more than sit in spreadsheets, I'm here. Then a call from Benjamin, senior technician. Then from Sarah, procurement. They started coming back. Not to me, but to what they believed in before Robert buried it in numbers. Northline stayed silent, but I knew they were watching. I chose the first space myself, a warehouse in a former industrial area, converted into a workshop. Brick, concrete, old beams, 1,500 square feet, high ceilings, loading dock out back. The previous tenant, a metalworking shop, went under during the pandemic. The landlord was desperate. Gave me a good rate, first month half price. I spent 2 days cleaning, old oil stains, rust on beams. Didn't matter. It was ours. When Sarah came and saw the place, she smiled. This is so you. Not trendy, but it works. I started putting the team together, one by one. By the end of the month, I had 8 people. Maya from systems analysis, quiet, methodical, could organize chaos into clarity. She'd worked with me for 6 years at Northline. Left 2 weeks after I did, said she couldn't work for Robert anymore. Benjamin from technical operations, 50 years old, hands-on. Could fix anything mechanical, diagnose anything electrical. Taught himself PLC programming from manuals when Northline wouldn't pay for training. He'd been passed over for promotion 3 times. Each time they gave it to someone younger with a degree but no real experience. Sarah from procurement, a sharp negotiator, knew every supplier in the region. Knew who delivered on time and who made promises they couldn't keep. She'd saved Northline hundreds of thousands by switching suppliers and renegotiating contracts, and never got credit. Two others from the old team, Daniel, who'd been in quality control, and Emily from the test lab. 3 new people through referrals. David stayed behind at Northline. Said someone needed to keep an eye on things from the inside. I didn't ask him to. He just did it. Each person had a story. Each person had been overlooked or undervalued somewhere else. Each person wanted to do real work that mattered. We weren't just building a company. We were building a team that actually functioned. We started with a small project for Briggs & Calder, reconfiguring a packaging line at their main warehouse. Simple on the outside, hell on the inside. Everything was outdated, patched over patches, zero documentation. Equipment from 4 different eras. A conveyor system from the 90s. A control panel from 2005 with buttons so worn you couldn't read the labels. Sensors added piecemeal over years. Motor controllers that didn't match the motors. Wiring that looked like someone's nephew did it over a weekend. Nobody knew how it all worked together anymore. It just did, until it didn't. We spent the first week documenting what existed. Drew diagrams by hand because the electrical schematics were useless. Half the components weren't on any drawings. Someone had scrawled notes in marker directly on the panel. Don't touch blue wire. Zone 3 override. Ask Phil. Phil retired 4 years ago. Nobody knew who he was. The previous engineer made modifications without updating anything, added a bypass here, rerouted a signal there, leaving no record, just tribal knowledge that walked out the door when he did. I traced every wire, photographed every connection, mapped every sensor, built documentation from scratch. Didn't sleep 3 nights until we found the key weakness, an ancient controller running an unstable protocol, a programmable logic controller from 1997. Communicating with newer equipment via adapters stacked 3 deep. Each adapter translating one protocol to another, each translation introducing delay and error. Like trying to get a rotary phone to talk to a smartphone through 2 different translators who only half understood each other. Technically possible, practically a nightmare. When we replaced it and rewired the line with proper protocols, productivity jumped 26%. Downtime went from 4 hours daily to 20 minutes. Error rate dropped from 11% to under 2%. Briggs & Calder was thrilled. They sent a check for $18,000. The project took 3 weeks. Could have taken 6 months through normal channels. More importantly, they sent a second job the same day, bigger, another facility with similar problems. Around that time, I got an unofficial email. Julian, hi. Did you really get a team back together? Hope it's not temporary because I want to leave too. Don't believe in what Robert's doing anymore. If you're ready, I'm with you. Ethan. The Golden Jr. The connected hire. Robert had put him in my spot after I got fired. Guess he understood now what it meant to be at the top when you actually had to deliver. I didn't reply right away. Official summons arrived Monday. A thick envelope, law firm logo, 3 pages of allegations, breach of employment agreement, poaching personnel, unauthorized use of internal information. I handed everything to the lawyer Briggs & Calder recommended. He flipped through it, snorted. Classic pressure attempt. None of the points have evidence. He'd send one hard demand, list exact files, drawings, or trade secrets with dates and proof. Force them to either produce access logs or withdraw quietly. I told him to do it. A week later, David called again, quieter this time. Said Robert pressured Ethan to sign a statement accusing me of poaching and IP misuse. Ethan signed it. Robert coached the whole thing. Ethan is freaking out now, David said. He did. I forwarded the message to my lawyer, then went back to work. But something else was happening. There was someone at Northline who didn't like Robert, George, a senior operations director. A guy who valued results over politics. When Keystone started having problems, George started asking questions. Not publicly, quietly. George pulled access logs during an internal investigation. Saw someone accessing old project files late at night. Saw the file history showed preliminary drafts being sent as final specs. George didn't say anything to Robert, just documented it. Waded through proper channels during the investigation. Those access logs found their way to my lawyer. An IT security analyst named Sophia had flagged them for compliance review, device identity, timestamp, file list. Someone pulling my old PDF drafts at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday using old permissions that should have been revoked. My lawyer filed them with our response. In the second week after launching the operation, the first problem started. One of Keystone's contractors delayed delivery by 10 days. At another site, conflict between two engineers over sensor array implementation. Maya rushed there, 6 hours of mediation. A third site had a power supply issue. A breaker kept tripping. Benjamin drove 4 hours to troubleshoot. Grounding problem from an installation done wrong 15 years ago. I felt that familiar weight returning to my shoulders, that pressure that once brought me to my knees, that feeling of being responsible for everything. Isabella found me at 2 a.m., poring over drawings any of 3 new specialists could have looked at. "You're taking everything on yourself again," she said softly. "If something goes wrong, it's my project." "No," she countered, "it's your project." "Or are you alone again?" Her words hit hard. The next day, I assembled the team. "Starting today," I announced, "I'm not touching current tasks. I'll stay coordinator and mentor, not executive. Someone fails, it's a lesson. They succeed, it's a result. Either case, I trust you." Everyone was silent. Then Benjamin spoke. "So, now we're not just working with you. We're a team." While we grew, Robert didn't sleep. A week after I ignored his threat email, an article appeared in a trade magazine, supposedly anonymous, about how a certain former engineer was using old connections to poach clients. I contacted the editor. "If you publish anonymous letters, publish facts too. Come visit. I'll show you how we work." The journalist, Ashley, a woman in her mid-30s with sharp eyes, arrived 3 days later. She spent 12 hours with us, from early line start to an evening dinner with the team. She watched Benjamin troubleshoot a sensor calibration. Watched Maya coordinate with 3 different suppliers. Watched the whole team work through a problem nobody had seen before, a temperature regulation system failing intermittently. It took us 4 hours to find it. A bad ground connection. Simple fix, once you knew where to look. Ashley took notes the whole time, asked smart questions. Then she talked to Sarah, Benjamin, even Isabella. A week later, the article was published, "When Honest Work Conquers Fear," the story of an engineer who left and built his own business. It opened with the anonymous hit piece, then systematically dismantled it with facts, timelines of clients who reached out, documentation of contracts signed, numbers showing real results. It ended with one line, "Sometimes, the best revenge is building something that works." After publication, we got 27 emails. 14 from customers who once worked with Northline, 8 from engineers asking if we were hiring, 3 from suppliers, 2 from investors, and 1 from someone I didn't expect. "Julian," I read it. "Sorry I didn't stand up for you back then. I was wrong. If you're willing to talk, I have something you should see." Marcus. The same Marcus, sitting in the meeting when I got fired. But he did something else. He attached an email chain. It showed Robert planning my layoff 2 weeks in advance. Showed Robert specifically targeting me. Showed the timeline manipulation. Receipts. The legal pressure wasn't over yet. Northline sent a cease and desist, accusing me of using internal information, unauthorized access, trade secret misappropriation. My lawyer responded with one hard demand: list exact files, drawings, or trade secrets with dates and proof. Your client must produce access logs, file histories, and internal emails. We will request full discovery if this proceeds. Northline went quiet for 3 days. Then their lawyer withdrew the claim. A short letter. After internal review, company has decided not to pursue this matter further. Translation: they couldn't prove anything without exposing their own mess. But there was one more thing that happened around this time, a small thing, but it meant something. Isabella had her Tuesday evening art class, never missed it. She'd been teaching the same group of seniors for 3 years. I had a client meeting scheduled for 6 p.m. on a Tuesday. Vantage Works wanted me to present our approach for a potential major contract. Big deal. Needed prep. Came home Monday night. Isabella was at the kitchen table. I canceled tomorrow's class. What? Why? You need someone to help you prep that presentation. You're good at engineering, terrible at PowerPoint. I said she didn't have to do that. I know I don't have to, she replied. I want to. We spent Tuesday afternoon working through slides. She reorganized the whole thing, made it actually make sense, made it tell a story instead of just listing facts. The next day, the client signed. That was when I knew she wasn't just watching anymore. She'd chosen. For months after I left, Keystone sent a written requirement to Northline. Subject line in the procurement email: urgent technical accountability requirement. Response required by end of business day. The body was one sentence: name one accountable technical lead with decision authority and on-call availability by 1700 hours today. David texted me minutes after it landed. They're pulling everyone into a room. Robert looks panicked. Robert staged a proof call. He had the replacement juniors on the line: Ethan, Marcus, Chloe. He'd stacked management, director of engineering, VP of operations. Robert coached them for 3 hours, gave them buzzwords, told them to sound confident. Told Ethan specifically to lead the answers. Rehearsed responses, practiced deflection, prepared talking points about leveraging synergies and optimizing deliverables. Nobody prepared them for actual technical questions. Keystone's engineering team joined the call at 1400 sharp. Leo, their QA lead Olivia, their facility manager. For people who actually knew the system. Leo started simple, professional, calm. Asked them to confirm current system status and timeline. Ethan jumped in with all the buzzwords Robert taught him: leveraging synergistic approaches, optimizing integration timelines, maintaining quality standards. Leo paused. 3 seconds of silence. Can you complete the current phase without redesigning the sensor array? Yes or no? Ethan hesitated, looked at Robert off camera, then said, yes. Absolutely. We can maintain current design parameters. Leo asked why the preliminary specs they sent showed pending supplier confirmation on 40% of components. Silence. Ethan froze. Stammered something about standard processes. Leo cut him off. They were labeled preliminary. Draft version 2.3. Not for final use. We needed actual specifications. Due 6 weeks ago. Marcus tried to jump in, started talking about coordinating with supply chain, confirming parameters align with requirements. Leo's voice went flat cold. He told them to stop. Ethan said yes, you can complete without redesign. Marcus just said you were still coordinating parameters. Which was it? More silence. Robert interrupted, started talking about full confidence. Leo shut him down. Said he was asking the engineers to answer, told Robert to let them speak. Ethan and Marcus looked at each other, both silent. Leo asked something simpler. The hidden cable runs between Workshop 2 and Workshop 5, installed in '98. You asked about unexplained signal loss between those buildings last month. Where are the runs located? Ethan blinked. Said they'd need to pull the documentation. There is no documentation, Leo stated. That's why I asked Julian originally, and he showed me. Do you know? Ethan mumbled they could research it. The client on line 3 is calling because their system is down. They need someone who can make decisions now, not research. Decide. Can you do that? Nobody answered. Leo's tone changed. Final. Send the name of your accountable engineer by end of day, or we're terminating this contract. He ended the call. Robert tried calling back. Went to voicemail. David texted, Robert is yelling at IT for the logs. 3 hours later, Leo emailed me directly. Neutral tone. Urgent. Need 15 minutes. We met the next day, neutral ground. I brought 1 page. Terms. Direct contract. Transparent payment. Fixed scope. No work through Northline. I choose tasks. Leo read it, signed it. Said they were sending Northline a final choice. Officially subcontract my team under their terms, or lose the contract. 2 days later, Keystone sent the official choice to Northline procurement. Subject line, contract continuation terms, subcontractor requirement. Robert refused. Tried one last pressure move. Called their VP. Threatened legal action. Keystone walked. Awarded the contract to me and Vantage works as a joint venture, me as technical lead. Northline learned via a procurement notice, short formal contract terminated for failure to meet technical accountability requirements. Awarded to alternate vendor effective immediately. David texted, Robert just got called into George's office. Compliance is with them. I archived it. Isabella showed up at the warehouse the morning the contract was awarded. I was reviewing site assignments with the team. She walked in with her tablet and a printed schedule, set them on the table, started restructuring. Who goes to which site? Who's on call? Delivery windows, client communications. Within an hour, she had it organized, color-coded, clear. 15 minutes later, a client showed up unexpectedly, wanting an immediate meeting. Isabella handled it smooth. He's in site review. You have 15 minutes with the right engineer now, or a full hour at 1,800 tomorrow. The client took the 15 minutes. Got exactly what they needed. I was at the warehouse late afternoon. The team was unloading gear for tomorrow's deployment. Benjamin came over. We start at 6 o'clock tomorrow. We start at 6, I affirmed. My phone rang. Robert. I looked at it. Picked up the dented thermos from the workbench, took one sip of cold coffee, and flipped the phone face down. A week later, I got an email from David. Subject line, you should know. Body was short. George called emergency review. Robert's on administrative leave pending investigation. They found access logs, draft specs sent as final, coached statements, all of it. Compliance is involved. I forwarded it to my lawyer for records, then went back to work. A week later, an official letter arrived. Not to me, but to Briggs and Calder, copied to Keystone, Northline's lawyer, withdrawing all claims. Short, formal. After comprehensive internal review, company withdraws all allegations and requests against Mr. Julian. We recognize no violations occurred. My lawyer sent one line back, acknowledged. Ethan showed up at the warehouse next morning, early, before anyone else. He had an envelope. Handed it to me. Inside was a letter addressed to my lawyer, retracting his coached statement, explaining Robert's pressure, explaining what actually happened. Signed, dated, notarized. I know I messed up, he said, his voice raw. This is everything I remember. Everything he told me to say. Everything that actually happened. I looked at him. You're here to work? Yeah. Then work. We'll talk later. He nodded, went to his station. Isabella came in at 8, tablet in hand. Started coordinating client calls, rescheduling site visits. By 9, we were running. The delivery truck arrived at noon. Equipment, materials, everything on schedule. I stood at the loading dock, watched Benjamin directing the unload. Watched Maya checking inventory. Watched Sarah coordinating with the driver. Watched Isabella at the desk, phone to her ear, scheduling next month's site rotation. Watched Ethan in the corner, actually working, actually learning. Robert texted my phone. We should talk. I looked at it. Set the phone down. Picked up my notebook, opened to tomorrow's schedule, and started planning. 2 days later, David texted, Robert resigned, effective immediately. George's memo cited policy violations. The board accepted it. He was gone. I read it twice, then deleted it. That afternoon, Keystone Procurement emailed, subject, vendor performance recognition. They praised our technical leadership and accountability, response time, problem resolution, system stability. The standard we expect. I forwarded it to the team. Anyway, we start at 6 o'clock tomorrow. This journey has been a whirlwind, a fight to reclaim not just my career, but my worth. What about you? Have you ever had to walk away from everything only to find true success on your own terms? Let me know your stories in the comments below. I'm reading every single one.